I gotta say, I don't think JD Vance is cut out for this. I don't think he's going any higher than vice president. You take a look at the betting markets, you take a look at the polling, and I know he's a strong contender for 2028, but I just don't think he has the charisma. I don't think he's cut out for this, especially in a personality-driven Republican primary contest. I just don't see JD Vance as the one coming out on top. And case in point, he did this event the other day at TPUSA, Charlie Kirk's organization, and it was not good for JD Vance. It did not go well because people didn't want to show up to this. They didn't want to go see the vice president speak in an auditorium, and we'll take a look at the crowd in just a second. But it's not surprising at all that people didn't want to go to the JD Vance event because people are upset with the Trump administration more broadly. They're upset with Trump's economy. They're upset with Trump's war in Iran. They're upset over Trump's handling of the Epstein files. Trump is deeply unpopular right now, so people are not going to want to associate with the Trump administration right now. That's why they're not going to show up to take a look at a speech delivered by his vice president. But I think it goes further than that. I think it's that JD Vance is just so boring. He has no personality, no charisma, and so why would people want to take time out of their day to go in person and listen to him speak? I just don't see it happening. Here's a look at the crowd that day, and as you can see, a really poor showing.
It doesn't bother me when he speaks on issues of the day, frankly, even when I disagree with how he's applying particular principles. So the most
So you can hear JD Vance speaking there. It's not before the event took place. It's not later on. That was as the event was happening, and it's just an arena full of empty seats. Now, there's also this interesting detail having to do with this because the person that was supposed to be hosting the event with JD Vance was Erika Kirk, the widow of the late Charlie Kirk, but she had to back out because of threats. There were threats coming her way, which of course is unfortunate. We don't want to hear that that's taking place. It's very sad and all, but how is it that the vice president of the United States was able to go to this event when, of course, he has Secret Service and there's always concerns about his security, but Erika Kirk was not able to go to the same event in the same arena? How is the security good enough for the vice president to show up to it, but it's not good enough for Erika Kirk to show up to it? Very strange. Let's take a look at them explaining this.
So for those of you wondering why I don't have really flowing, long, blonde hair right now, so I'm going to address it right at the front. Mr. Vice President, I'm on stage here instead of our friend Erika Kirk.
That's right.
Because unfortunately, she has received some very serious threats in her direction, which is terrible. It's a terrible reflection on the state of reality and the state of the country. But it underscores a larger point that she has received a lot of attacks from surprising places, perhaps. Tell us what you think about that. Some of the people that have made, part-time jobs out of attacking Erika, and this is the net result.
Sure. Well, first of all, I love Erika, and I know that she did get some threats. And, about 2 hours ago, as you know, Andrew, I was a little worried that we were going to have to cancel the event because Erika was not going to come, and she was very worried about it. And I talked to the Secret Service, and obviously these guys do a very good job. And I said, you know what? Let's let Erika do what she needs to do for herself and her family. I'm sure Andrew will fill in. And let's go and make this an amazing event with the Georgia Bulldogs in Athens, Georgia.
So that's pretty strange, right? That the security would be good enough for the vice president of the United States, but not good enough for Erika Kirk. I understand she's probably traumatized and deeply affected by the murder of her husband that took place a few months ago in broad daylight, right? So I'm sure maybe that had to do with the decision to a degree, but the fact that they were able to secure the perimeter for the VP, but it wasn't good enough for Erika Kirk, it just seems a little strange, right? It seems as though there may be something else going on here. And then we get into the substance of the event, and JD Vance talks about the war in Iran. Of course, a lot of young Trump voters especially are upset with Trump over the war in Iran because Trump promised during the campaign that he was going to end wars. He wasn't going to start any new wars. And in fact, it was Kamala who was going to start all these wars, including a war with Iran. Of course, that's not what happens. Trump is doing the exact opposite of what he campaigned on. So Trump voters, and especially a lot of young Trump voters, are upset with Trump over this. And JD Vance says, look at other things that we're doing. That's his response. And I think he's saying this One, because he knows he's not going to be able to defend Trump's record when it comes to the war, especially to these people who are anti-war. They're just not going to be convinced by it. But also he's trying to distinguish himself from the other Republicans he could be going up against in the primary. Like if he goes up against Marco Rubio, for example, who is known as more of a hawk, who has been more instrumental in this war, he can set himself aside from those people by saying, I actually wasn't with Trump on this one. I've always expressed the fact that this wouldn't be a good look for us, that we would lose young voters over this. And so here is JD Vance trying to do a couple of things, defend the administration while at the same time distinguish himself from some of the other Republicans.
Like, for example, I recognize that a lot of young voters don't love the policy that we have in the Middle East. Okay, I understand that. I also know that we've secured the border. We've lowered housing prices now for 8 months in a row, and there's going to be more to come beyond that. We've made America energy dominant, which has lowered electricity costs and things like that. We've made it so that we have the lowest murder rate in 127 years. I'm not saying you have to agree with me on every issue. I'm not saying you have to agree with me on every issue. What I'm saying is don't get disengaged because you disagree with the administration on one topic. Get more involved. Make your voice heard even more.
So JD Vance's solution, his response to the young Trump voters who are upset with Trump over the war, is to basically just say, don't pay attention to it. Tune it out. Ignore it. Even though it's going to be really difficult to do when the war in Iran is the top story in the world right now. The Strait of Hormuz is closed. There's all these economic effects from the war. People are dying. America's reputation around the world is suffering, but JD Vance just says to those people, don't even pay attention to it. Pay attention to some other things. And of course, the things that he lists aren't that great for the Trump administration either. They're not great examples. Like he talks about how the murder rate is the lowest in a long time, even though murder rates and crime rates have been precipitously declining for decades, and it has nothing to do with anything Trump has done. He's also talking about how people should focus on how America is energy independent, even though we're seeing that that's not worth all that much when gas prices are at over $4 a gallon and people are upset over Trump's energy policy. And then he talks about immigration, but we know that the public has soured on Trump's immigration policy, especially with the ICE raids and the unlawful killings and actions they've been taking since he's retaken office. So JD Vance is not able to just explain away this war by saying, don't even look at it. That's not going to be sufficient. And then he decides to defend Trump on the Epstein scandal. He must realize that Trump is doing a terrible job defending himself when it comes to his Epstein connections. And JD Vance comments on how Trump has called the Epstein scandal a hoax. He tries to clear up the confusion having to do with that.
Right? I don't want powerful people, being involved in this disgusting behavior. But I have to defend the president on this because when he said that it was a hoax, what he was talking about was this democratic idea that he's connected to Epstein. If you look at those emails, it's like, they were in the same, everybody in Palm Beach knew everybody, okay? Like the president has said he knew Jeffrey Epstein and he was a scumbag. But what you see in those emails is that Jeffrey Epstein hated Donald Trump. And Donald Trump hated Jeffrey Epstein. In fact,
so of course we know that Trump and Epstein had a falling out. We know that their friendship ultimately ended. But what the American public is interested in is what happened before that falling out while they were friends. Did Trump go to the islands? Did he do illegal things during the time he was friends with Jeffrey Epstein? And also, JD Vance is doing his best at damage control because Trump keeps calling the Epstein scandal a Democrat hoax. And so Americans hear that and they think that Trump is trying to claim that Jeffrey Epstein never did anything wrong, that the things that he's accused of doing are overblown or false. So that's why it doesn't sound so great when Trump says that the Epstein scandal is a Democrat hoax. JD Vance realizes this. He knows his boss isn't articulate enough to say what he's trying to say, and so he tries to fill in the gaps by saying, oh, well, it's a Democrat hoax that Trump and Epstein were friends, because he knows Trump isn't going to be able to put those words together himself, I guess, and so here is JD Vance. But JD Vance just isn't really all that good at this. I gotta say, he doesn't have the X factor that you need to have in order to become president, and I think that's exemplified by the fact that not a lot of people wanted to show up at this TPUSA event to listen to him speak. But hopefully you're interested in what I have to say here on the David Pakman Show. I'm Pat Ford, guest hosting today as David is traveling back from Argentina. We have plenty more of the show coming up after the break.
Identity theft and targeted scams often start long before the breach, when bits of your personal life, addresses, emails, relatives, your work history, are scattered around the internet on these data broker sites, and that information is sold or reused. Our sponsor, Incogni, will get that stuff removed for you, not from just a single type of website. They will work to take down your personal information wherever it shows up online, shrinking the pool of info that bad actors rely on. Incogni automatically handles removals from hundreds of known sites, but their unlimited plan goes even further with custom removals, where if you find your info anywhere, paste the link to Incogni, and they will get to work removing that for you. This matters because a single overlooked listing can be enough for a scammer to impersonate you or even open accounts in your name. Incogni's data removal process is independently verified by Deloitte, which adds a layer of trust. You can get 60% off when you go to incogni.com/Pakman and use the code Pakman. The link is in the description.